All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program. You know we're talking Johnny Cuba. European roots with that Caribbean soul, a refreshing German lager in a can. How else are you going to enjoy college football playoff quarterfinals getting going tonight? Go to johnnycuba.us. You find the nearest location to you. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. So I'm very pumped up for the college football quarterfinals. Everybody knows that. And joining us now, you hear him on SiriusXM, ESPN Radio, including ESPN Radio College Game Day. Our pal is Matt Schick. Matt, debut appearance for you on ZASLOW Show 2.0. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
It's an honor and a pleasure, Zaz, to be on with you. Thank you for coming on College Game Day a couple of weeks ago. It was great to have you and your buddy fun, Amber Wilson on. That was great. You guys were, a stone's throw away from the SEC championship game. We got to talk to you as that game was going on. Certainly a lot's changed since then.
It was funny, because going into doing that show, they told Amber and I, all right, you're going to come back, at halftime. You're going to go back into the Airstream studio. You're going to join the College Game Day guys. It'll be Matt Schick and Matt Sims and Derek Dooley. And we're like, all right, that's a lot of voices. I don't know. That could be kind of nutty. And I'll tell you, both of us, we thought it went fantastic. It was a lot of fun.
It was great. It's always hard, especially in radio, right, where you have to be like, all right, who's talking now? You're going next. This person's going next. We could all see each other. No one else could see us. That's the way radio works nowadays. But, yeah, that was great. You guys were the boots on the ground there at the SEC, and you could hear the crowd going nuts from inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium while you guys were about 100 yards away. It was fun.
Yeah, we're going to be back there, I guess, what are we talking, about 21 days from now. We're going to be back there for the national championship. We're also going to be back out on the road college football tailgate in 10 days from now for the Cotton Bowl. We'll be out there in Dallas. But tonight, we got Penn State, Boise State, Fiesta Bowl. What do you make of the conversation surrounding the playoffs right now, Matt? Because I think there's way too much negativity out there. I'm very excited for these games. Why are we so negative about the college football playoff?
I think it's because people anticipated that the first round would just be so electric and fun with the atmosphere that the games just, I would say in retrospect, could not possibly live up to what we saw and what we got to experience with the atmosphere. I think that was a part of it. The games were almost a letdown to the on-campus environments. And so, when you go 0 for 4 in terms of competitive games, and you can make the argument about Clemson and Texas, but these weren't very competitive games. And then you have that, you go, wait, this isn't what it was supposed to be. And then you got folks coming out of the woodwork saying, well, see, this team shouldn't have been in, that team shouldn't have been in. And then it turns into a referendum on the system, on the format, on the seating, and specifically on the teams, and sometimes the entire conferences on these games. When if you look at it, you go, we get blowouts all the time. We had them in the semifinals. We had them in national championship games. We had Trevor Lawrence blowing out Alabama, Clemson against Alabama to 1 versus 2. Oh my gosh, battle of unbeaten is going to be great. It wasn't. So you get this stuff all the time, and I think we just need to understand these things happen. They've happened forever. They'll happen forever going on forward. And just enjoy it. I thought going into the first rounds as that it was going to be the best weekend of the entire tournament. Not necessarily because of the outcomes of the games, but because they were on campus. And I think, hopefully moving forward, we'll have that.
I'll tell you, though, when you allow 12 teams in the college football playoff, you're going to be more susceptible to some games like we just saw, especially when they're road games for those lower-seeded teams. I mean, certainly down here in South Florida, conversation, SMU, it should have been Miami, or Indiana, should have been Miami. I got news for you, Matt. If Miami would have played, at one of those teams, take your pick. It could be at Penn State. It could be at Notre Dame. The Canes would have gotten their ass kicked. Like, whoever's going to wind up being the 11th seed, the 12th seed, it's such an uphill climb anyway.
There's no question about that. It's funny you mentioned that about Miami, because I was talking to somebody during the Miami-Iowa State game going, you know what? Miami's defense is why they're must-see TV, and they're also why they were excluded from the playoff and didn't make it. Like, if you would have told Miami, all you have to do is beat Syracuse or Georgia Tech, to get to the college football playoff, or tell Alabama, all you need to do is beat Oklahoma or Vanderbilt. Win one of those two games, you'll get in. Or Ole Miss, just beat Florida, would you? You'll get in. that they would have taken that 10 times out of 10. And so, yeah, I'm with you on this stuff. And look, the only pushback I'll give on this is that once you give teams that aren't in the top 8, let alone the top 10 buys in a tournament, it screws up the whole tournament. And so the fact that we look at tonight and we have a runner-up in the Big Ten championship game in Penn State that is a double-digit favorite against their opponent, whereas the team that they lost to in the Big Ten championship game is a coin flip game against Ohio State. Same thing with Texas and Georgia. Georgia beats Texas. Georgia's in a much more challenging game against Notre Dame, especially without their starting quarterback, than Texas is against Arizona State. So Texas shouldn't have even played if you seed it properly. Penn State shouldn't have even played in the first round if you seed it properly. Those teams get buys, and then it's Indiana versus Boise State. Then it's SMU and Tennessee. Then it's Clemson and Notre Dame. You'll probably get a better game there with the trenches and Clemson being able to hang with Notre Dame. So I think moving forward, we'll get that. So I think if you want to get a pushback, it's not about the teams that we're in. It's about the way the format is constructed. And I think starting next year, you'll probably see it differently.
I'm glad you brought that up because all throughout the season, this was a conversation. Should the teams that win their conference, should they automatically get a bye and jump into the top 4? And I had no issue with the way that we're going about things. But then once the first round happened and we saw the matchups for the quarterfinal and you saw the betting lines and the 2 games with the teams that jumped into the top 4, Boise State and Arizona State, are double-digit dogs when they're the higher seeded team, that bothered me. And then I'm like, this is not right. There's something wrong about this. I feel like, Matt, we skipped a step where you go back 20 years ago, when Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl, Statue of Liberty play, it was so exciting. Like that was the beginning of a team like Boise State who's, in the conversation, but is never going to be able to get into the actual playoff, into a 14 playoff. We went from a team like Boise State and Arizona State too, for that matter, not being able to compete for a national championship. And we bumped them all the way to getting a bye and a top 4 seed when there was a place they should have landed in the middle, which was win your conference, you're in the playoffs. I feel like we skipped a step.
There's overcorrection going on here, just like there was in NIL and player empowerment and player movement. Like we've gone the entire other way, and it just makes things inequitable. I think too, when you think about it, like the format of the 12-team playoff with the 5 highest ranked conference champs was originally constructed with 5 conferences that were somewhat on even playing field. Like Arizona State, that's a Pac-12 team. Oregon, that's a Pac-12 team. Like you've got these teams. SMU, that's not an ACC team. So you're going through some of these machinations of who should be here, who should be there. And you think to yourself, well, Texas was in the Big 12. Like that would have been different. So now that things have settled and now that you've got these conferences that certainly are more unequal perhaps than they've ever been, that you've got an opportunity here to fix this going forward. I'm like you, Zaz. I did not have an issue with the way they constructed it. I like the fact that you reward conference champs, but you reward conference champs with inclusion. It's still got to be a meritocracy. You don't reward them with not having to play a game. There should be no reward for a team that isn't one of the top 12 teams in the playoff or in the country to just get a bye into that. So I think we will fix that. And I think once that happens, then I think these first round games will be better. And even if they get blown out in the quarterfinals, at least we're seeing some competitive games early. Teams get weeded out as the thing goes. You see it in the NFL, you see it in the NCAA tournament, and we'll see it here as well.
Big conversation over the weekend, certainly down here in South Florida, also nationally. Cam Ward, Hurricanes, Pop-Tarts Bowl. He doesn't play in the second half. What was your reaction?
Zero issue with it. I was trying to muster the energy to be angry or indignant about it. I didn't have a problem with it. Now, I'm not a Miami fan. I'm not, my joke was that you're either a Miami fan or had Miami in the bowl pick'em in the confidence pool, and you had them high, and that's why you're really upset about it. If you are not going to get upset about players opting out of bowl games anymore, which I think we've moved past, then I think it's hypocritical to get upset for a guy saying, hey, I'm going to play this first half, or the team and them having that conversation, play the first half, get whatever record you want, maybe a bonus record, and then sit out the second half. I'm not buying into this was all part of the plan to see what Emory Jones could do behind the scenes or what have you. I'm not seeing that, but at the same time, I understand why a Cam Ward would make this decision. I get why Miami could say, okay, let's do this. It was pre-planned. I know there are those pounding their fists saying, look, this isn't something Miami should have signed up on. If I'm Miami, would I rather have 2 quarters of Cam Ward or none? I'm okay with it. These are, if you say they're exhibitions, then why bash a kid for only playing in half of an exhibition? I can't get there, Zaz. How'd you feel about it?
Oh, I went to the game. Me and my son, we were at the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and then like in the first series, I say to myself, "Oh, Cam Ward's out. He's not playing anymore." And it was greeted with a shrug. We're like, "All right, there are dudes dressed as Pop-Tarts running around the sidelines. All right, I'm not about to get crazy over it, but here's where I think Mario Cristobal did a terrible job, and here's why. The day before the game, in his press availability, he's talking about Cam Ward. It's in his DNA. He knows he's got to finish the job. It's his responsibility, and that's why he wants to play. And then after the game, when he was asked about it, it was this like vow of secrecy where Cristobal would not disclose conversations. They're private and how they came about the decision. Like, Matt, what do you think the reaction would have been if before the game, Cristobal said, listen, Cam wants to play, so we've come up with a plan. He's going to play the first half, and then we believe Emory Williams, he has earned an opportunity to play. We want to get a look at him. We want to see what maybe our future looks like with Emory, so he's going to get the second half. What do you think the reaction would have been if he did that?
First of all, I'm glad you said Emory Williams. I said Emory Jones, the former Florida quarterback. It's still Sunshine State. I was in the ballpark. But you're right. A lot of this can be solved with messaging. Yep. A lot of it can be solved with just letting folks know what to expect so that they're not like, oh, my goodness. I was on, you mentioned the College Game Day show. We're on with Matt Sims and Derek Dooley this past weekend, and we're picking these games. And we went through it, and they said, okay. And they were like, well, I'm picking Miami, and I'm picking Miami. And they said they're going to play. And I said, I'm still not sure how much they're going to play. And their counter, and that's why I picked Iowa State on the show. And they said, well, he says he's going to play. I said, I know he says he's going to play, but if I'm him, am I going to play? If I'm him, am I going to play the whole game? I was not surprised at all that he didn't play in that second half. But to your point, the leader of the program you have to look like you're in charge. And the way you do that is by messaging, whether you agree with the decisions or not. And so Cristobal, he's had some issues with that in the past. He's got to get his arms around this. And you can be player friendly, but you also have to let those that are supporting your program know what's up.
Yeah, he really did Cam Ward no favors there. Matt, let's talk some about these games. Tonight, Boise State, Penn State. What does this mean for James Franklin? The reaction if he loses will be what? The reaction if Penn State wins will be what?
Well, James Franklin and Penn State are like 32, 33-1 as favorites. Like they just win games like this. So my concern for James Franklin and Penn State is that he's not going to get the credit that he probably deserves for getting his team to a semifinal, because we were saying as the playoff began, you'd rather be the 6th-seeded Penn State than the 1-seeded Oregon for your path. So if you'd rather have that path, then you'd better win these games. And so I think for James Franklin and Penn State, to me, it's a real step up in class for Boise State. You look at some of the numbers and some of the team efficiency metrics of teams that they've faced. UNLV top 25. Outside of that, and Oregon for sure, but it's Utah State, it's Colorado State, it's San Diego State. It's teams that don't have much of a pulse nationally. So to step up and play a Penn State defense like this, and Abdul Carter and Denai Dennis Sutton and this front seven, I think is going to cause some real issues here. So I think Penn State wins the game, but I think Ashton Jeanty, just because of the volume, is going to get his as well. I don't think it's as simple as stop Ashton Jeanty and just stop Boise State, but it's pretty dang close to that. But I think a Penn State win is expected, but it should be applauded. James Franklin to be in the Final Four should be outstanding for this program that always said if we expanded this playoff, we'd be in the playoff, we'd be having home games. Well, they got the home game. They winterized the stadium for it. They got the home game. Now they're in a quarterfinal and hope to improve to 8-0 in Fiesta Bowls. I think they do. And then you could be looking at a real good shot at an all Big Ten championship game.
Which of the big dogs, Boise State or Arizona State, have a better chance?
Oh, I think it's Arizona State because Texas really struggles with the downfield passing game. So I think there's an opportunity there for Arizona State to keep that game closer. And if Cam Scatterbo if his bite is as good as his bark in this pregame, like he's going to have 150 yards by the fourth quarter. So that is the matchup where I'm looking forward to seeing just how well they do. I know they're without their top wideout, Arizona State. They were in the Big 12 championship game as well. But I would say Arizona State just simply because of the way that Texas goes about their business. I think Penn State is just going to wear down Boise State.
I think it's interesting what's going on with Ohio State right now. Ohio State and Oregon's at 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, where I thought Tennessee had a real shot in Columbus in the first round. I thought Ohio State was susceptible. And now, after winning that game the way they did, it feels like Ohio State's got a ton of momentum going into this one now.
They have a ton of momentum. I'm with you about Tennessee. I thought that was not just a trendy pick, probably the right pick of plus 7.5 in that game. And then Tennessee forgot their shirts and their offense in that first half in the locker room. I said if they play like that, you go back and go, okay, this Michigan loss was the best thing to happen to them in terms of galvanizing. If you thought it would tear them apart, how's that? Could that loss kind of splinter this locker room and Ryan Day's going to be out? But I think Herbie is right in one thing, that if they lose this game, those people are going to be back out of the work. See, you can't win these games that are coin flips against top 5 teams. You got to be able to do that. But I'm with you. The Ohio State, I'm not necessarily sure they have a decided talent edge, but they have an edge to them mentally from the neck up. Something about this team that says they have completely turned the page from Michigan. But it is hard to get past just how talented and good this Oregon team is. Jordan Birch up front, and Tej Johnson at 100%, and Dylan Gabriel, they have the quarterback edge there in this game. It feels like the kind of game that's going to come down to the final possession. Hopefully for Will Howard, it doesn't come down to the final slide, but it feels like it's going to come down to the final minute.
Are we going to find out about this Notre Dame team? Like, are we going to find out they're an imposter, or are we watching the real deal here most of the season?
Well, it's interesting about Notre Dame. I've been a believer of them since about midseason just because they've been dismantling the opposition. Yeah. But at the same time, people ranked on and kind of gave Indiana a hard time, Zaz, about their schedule. Notre Dame's was pretty much in the neighborhood in terms of their strength of schedule here. I think for Notre Dame, what does Marcus Freeman do defensively? I think Stockton he's fine. I think he's good. I don't think there's much of a drop off there with Carson Beck, but the experience is something you can't quantify. I will say there with Stockton that from those that I've spoken with, and one person in particular who's very familiar with him, says the team loves this guy. The team absolutely would prefer.
I think you were able to tell. In the SEC title game.
And sometimes as you see that with like a backup quarterback, he's always the most popular guy. But to your point, there was something tangible there in that game. And then those that know the program say those who are behind the scenes in the locker room prefer Stockton to Carson Beck in terms of his leadership. So that's going to be a real interesting thing. He didn't play lights out in a backup role. It's so much different when you have, when you are the guy and a couple of weeks to prepare. But I do think that because both of these teams are similar in how they like to operate, I just think Georgia has better players. And I think that's what this comes down to. I think Georgia wins it in a close game. But if it's now or never for Dame, simply because you're taking on a Georgia team that does have its backup quarterback. So we'll see what defensively they can do. They lost a key guy in that defensive front, which is really important and detrimental there for Notre Dame. But they need to get it done on the ground with Jeremiah Love and company, because Riley Leonard is not the kind of quarterback that's going to stretch the field.
Matt, excellent job. You can catch Matt, of course, ESPN Radio, ESPN Radio College Game Day, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern, SiriusXM. It's channel 150. What number is it?
SiriusXM channel 80 for ESPN Radio, let you know, and SiriusXM 372 for Big Ten channel.
I was way off.
You were
not even Samsonite. I was way off. Matt, thank you so much for joining us here. I appreciate it. Enjoy the games. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Anytime, buddy. Big fan. Glad to do it. Anytime.